I think, or at least I hope that by now, it's pretty much common knowledge that the current industry relying on animal protein is pretty much inefficient, has dramatic climate impact. I think it's already backed by staggering numbers that at least most of the people sitting here should be aware of. And this is from the land use and water use to the pollution that it creates, depletion of the seas if we're talking about fish and marine life. And that's before even mentioning the fact that there is a growing population that has to be fed. And at the current numbers and the current rate we're going, it's pretty clear that we are reaching a severe threat to food security. So in this session, we're going to ask a few questions about this growing space. As mentioned here, this is one of the most impressive, I think, fields that Israel is a leader in creating new startups in this area and new solutions. Okay, sorry. Creating new areas and new solutions for creating alternative protein sources, new technologies for producing it, and new ways of mimicking in order to get our nutritional and culinary preferences then. In this panel, we will try to treat the question, how sustainable is indeed this new field? And do we actually have the ability to close the gaps before we reach scalability and price and texture and taste? What is the consumer perspective around these new technologies? And for that, I'm very happy to have a very, promising and mission-driven group of people here. So, Shay Cohen from Tnuva, Chief Innovation Officer.
Hi everybody.
And we have Nir Goldstein from GFI, the Good Food Institute, Israel, a great supporter of the space. And we have Jason from Remilk, which is, I think, one of the most promising startups around the space for supporting fermentation-based new caseins. So I think maybe, Jason, let's start with you, being in the midst of the process of bringing this actually to the market. And my first question to you is, we're talking about sustainability, and eventually we're looking for the numbers that will support these claims. So how do you approach this area? Do you have the numbers? Do you calculate them? And is this concept of life cycle analysis that is supposed to actually back this up is actually used by you?
Yeah, so thank you. I hope I'm not too loud. I'm trying to modulate the volume here. But Jason, thank you all very much, and thank you, Noga. This is an extremely important topic to talk about. So I think the first and most important thing to note is that on a conceptual level, alternative proteins are more efficient than the traditional production methods. And that goes back to the pure efficiency of microorganisms in doing one specific thing, as opposed to large 600 to 900 kilo animals that have many purposes in life, right? So for every bit of energy that they intake, only a specific small amount of that is going to be translated into our targeted proteins. So from the get-go, we have this high-level understanding that we are more efficient. But now, as Noga said, we need to somehow quantify this so that we can also stand behind this. We can openly make claims to both consumers and customers, and we can work together to build a business case that really makes more sense. And this is all aside from our core mission of making the world better, right, and improving processes. There is a term that's often thrown around and often talked about, LCA, or life cycle assessment. This is the general document or agreed upon manner to quantify your sustainability score. We at Remilk do run our own LCAs on our process depending on where we are producing in the world. But this is really one of the challenges for startups in the space, is that startups begin with a concept and a theory and a lab, and they have some data that they can collect, but it may not properly depict what's going to happen at scale and what's going to happen when they produce in a real facility. So it is something that we at Remilk believe needs to be staged over time. Companies begin assessing their process in the lab and establish new LCAs over time and constantly share that with their partners and with the world. And so I hope pretty soon we're actually going to publish ours, and then you guys can all read it.
So speaking of publications, Nir, you and GFI, you are trying to address these kind of cross issues and trying to help promote the whole industry. What's your take on quantification of the space?
Yeah, thank you, Noga. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. Maybe you can use this one so that you people in the audience could hear you as well without headphones. If I may, just a question to the audience so that we know who exactly we're speaking with. How many of you are entrepreneurs by a show of hand? Just a few. Investors? Industry, food industry, others? Public sector? All right, so we have a very healthy mix. How many of you are food or alternative protein experts? Almost none. So if I may, to answer your question, let's take a step back before we conduct the LCA. What are we really dealing with here? The global food industry is one of the largest food industries in the world. It's about $12 trillion, not billion, a year, and it emits more than 20% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from the way we produce protein using animals. If cattle were a country, it was the second most emitting of greenhouse gases country in the world. This is the magnitude of the problem that we are talking about. The animal food industry is using more than 70% of the global agricultural land and the fresh water. It uses more than 70. Can you hear me okay? It uses more than 73% of the global use of antibiotics, which is causing resistance to antibiotics, which according to the WHO will be the world's number one cause of death by 2050. And I can go on and on and on for a very long time. 70% of the pollution of fresh water. The magnitude of the challenge is immense, and humanity cannot tackle climate change without tackling the way we are currently producing protein. It's impossible. We will not meet. We will not be. I was in my element. We will not be able to meet our climate goals without very profoundly changing the way humanity is producing protein. So we know all of it. But on the contrary, humanity is going to double its consumption of meat by 2050. Despite we know all of this, it's impossible to significantly change the human consumption habits. So the whole field of alternative protein is about this. Let's give humanity what they want, what they're even going to double the consumption by 2050, but without changing the consumption habits. Let's create protein, milk, other dairy products, meat, eggs, using alternative methods, cultivated meat, plant-based fermentation. So
insects, algae, fungi,
leaf, we can go on and on. The opportunities are immense. So respectfully, I resent the question. It's not about the LCA, which is very important. If plant-based products are more than 90% more efficient than their animal-derived equivalents. If we are 90% more efficient or 91% more efficient, it's important. But going back at it, it's impossible for humanity to meet its climate goals without using alternative proteins.
Having said that, though, and understanding that you may be very much convinced but still need the tools in order to convince others, because if you want to create a real disruption, you actually have to have more people understanding, realizing this, putting the money in it, changing regulation around it, and for that quantification is important. It's so important, actually, the GFI themselves have actually published lately something around that. Can you share maybe a little bit about the process of doing so? You want to add something?
Yeah, so maybe I will jump in. I represent in this panel the most progressive player in the value chain. We are actually we are not known, but we are actually the largest alternative protein company in Israel. Everybody knows Tnuva as the national food company, but we are actually leading the alternative protein segments, and we are quantifying everything that we are doing all the time. And I agree, it's gradual. We need to look at this stage right now as phase one of creating the infrastructure in order to create a massive change. We won't be able to measure, and it's very important to say to investors, it's very important to represent this to all the ecosystem players. We won't be able to get the sufficient resources to create the infrastructure if we will measure the influence at this stage?
So maybe this is a good opportunity to actually address this, and I can give my perspective on this as we run an incubator. We're investing into early stage startups. So we are following kind of a general notion that we're probably doing good. I mean, we have kind of this red line. If it's not sustainable in perception, if it's not healthier in perception, we're not going to invest in it. But having the ability to quantify and then translate this into the business model is something that we hear more and more follow-on investments looking for. They're looking for the numbers because eventually you have to compare. Not to mention that you still hear existing industry or traditional industry looking at this space and trying to figure out alternative ways that will still help them maintain their current operation, but hopefully reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. So there are some sort of initiatives around that, zero carbon, for example, trying to use existing measurements and have some sort of a baseline, and according to that to try and reduce. So this is one perspective of looking at it. What does the current industry do and try to do better, even if it's by concept? But I have to admit as well that we don't have the tools right now. So I think we were hoping to get maybe some sort of a positive premonition of the ability to quantify. But what I'm hearing from you guys is, okay, we'll have to go with notions at this point because it's literally impossible to have the exact numbers. Yes, Jason.
So I'd actually, and I apologize if I may have given off the wrong impression from our end. I think that getting going, we need to rely on that sort of overlying concept of this seems more sustainable and really dig into the rationale behind that. But as companies mature, and like Shay mentioned here, as Tnuva, an established leader in this field, develops new products, they do have the ability to assess that. And so I think that as we see startups mature as well and move from that, that early R&D development into their scaling up and into their, growing out and maturation phases, that not only can we, but we have the absolute responsibility to assess ourselves on a quantifiable level.
So I'm going to pick that and actually ask you about that growth phase you're at and the scaling up challenge you're trying to address when you're doing it. And again, we're talking about the ability to move to large quantities relevant for the food industry. We're talking about taking price down and making it more accessible. And we're talking about the basic challenges of making it as similar and as acceptable by consumers as possible. So can you maybe give us a few points on these challenges and how you're trying to address it?
Yeah, I think it's great. So I'll try to touch on all of those. I think first and most important to say is that, and I'm going to disagree here, maybe just to create a little bit of back and forth. But Nir had mentioned who really cares about the 91 versus 90%. If I go back to those same figures that you presented of a multi-trillion-dollar industry, that 1% is pretty darn big. And so even before we get into the impact on the climate, if we just look at the business case, right, and I'll start from there before going into, again, our overlying goal. But if I just start from the business case, the world of carbon insetting is growing day by day. And companies who have their ESG goals, if we can help them support reaching net zero goals, reaching certain savings, we can actually make a business case out of it while, and excuse me, I'll stop talking, but as Noga said as well, we have the intention of getting cheaper and driving down costs. Well, reality is that we're competing with an industry that has built supply chains for, decades and decades and decades and much longer in certain areas of the world. We are more expensive today, and that's a given. And so if we want to enter, we have to find other ways to make this financially viable for our partners, and one such way is by having an established, positive, and reliable LCA.
If I may, so on the specifics, I couldn't agree with you more, but I'm trying to take the broader picture. And if we look around here, there are dozens of startups here with us today. All of them are really wonderful and come with a great idea and passion in mind. But ideas that do not take major control of the market, even if the idea is wonderful, their impact is very, very limited. And so what I'm saying is that most alternative protein technologies are so much more efficient than the animal-derived equivalent that the major thing is let's get into the market, and if we will begin by 80% and then we'll end with 91%, it's great, it's a progress, but let's get this Pareto with a big chunk of 80% first. And in order to do that, there are a variety of backgrounds here in the room with us. In food, we need to go after 3 parameters. According to the marketing studies, I'll conclude with this: price, taste, convenience. We need to make sure that the products get off the shelf, that people want to buy them. If you have a 150% decrease in emissions, but the product does not come off the shelf, the impact is zero. So let's focus on taste, on the texture, on the all of the sensory effects. Let's focus on price. Let's get the products to be at the same price or lower. We can do it. The efficiency, as you said, are very clear. And let's get to convenience. Like make sure that your product, like Tnuva did wonderfully, which is a case study around the world, the alternative line of products is available in any place in Israel, and this is what creates consistency. The problem of our industry nowadays is repurchases because of all of these factors.
Yeah, I'm not used to not talking so much time.
Wonderfully.
Thank you. So anyone here at the panel or at the audience knows how much resources Tesla raised before they reached the market? Someone knows? Someone has Googled? It's approximately between 19 to 20 billion dollars. From our perspective, the driver right now at this stage is economical. Okay, we need to make sure we get sufficient funds from the ecosystem, from investors, from governments, from the academy, in order to create the infrastructure. I don't think anyone has the right metrics, okay, even us. And we are actually manufacturing protein and alternative protein. So, and no one has the metrics right now, but we need consumer adoption that sums all what Nir said about pricing and prosperity and taste, texture. And in order to create consumer adoption, right now, we need a lot of resources from governments and investors.
And maybe to kind of try and clarify when we talk about challenges. So Nir, you've mentioned before, and thank you for the nice intro, but there are different types of technologies and different attempts in order to kind of challenge this. So Jason here, I think, largely represents fermentation as one of the main pillars, but there's also cellular agriculture, cultivated meats, to use the right term, and of course plant-based. So maybe as both you and Shay maybe are touching upon the various technologies in these areas, can you maybe point out, if you have to say, where is the biggest challenge in those? Where are we, what are we looking at? I mean, I know price parity, we've talked about taste, but then in the technology itself, the production itself, where do you see the main challenges there?
So food tech in Israel and in the world is relatively new. We are talking about an ecosystem that started to be conceptualized, and we have Oren here and a lot of people responsible for this change in the Innovation Authority and your other friends from the industry started conceptualizing around 2011, started the Innovation Authority in Strauss, opened the kitchen in 2015. Tnuva gave a ton of push. Right now, this is still a very, very young tech industry. Keep in mind that it's not an application. To develop a new food product, it's a much, much longer process, especially if agricultural cycles are taken into account as well. Having said that, the global market share of alternative proteins out of the total protein market is at about 1%. In Israel, according to the G5 studies, in meat we're at about 5-6 if you count certain products like tofu, which you don't necessarily have to. But in dairy, and again, a lot of it thanks to what alternatives have done with dairy, we're at about 16%. 16%. And this shows us that once we have developed enough product in the parameters that I mentioned, we're doing good. What are the barriers for scale? Besides those, in order to convince the majority of the audience, the ones who are not vegan and who are not deeply motivated by climate, which the majority of consumers are not, We need to convince, at least at the beginning, the audience that we are calling flexitarians, those who are willing to try and adapt to new habits of eating from different products. So in the different technologies that you have mentioned, a lot of it is about scale. In cultivated meat, this is an industry that obviously has to still prove itself as something that is financially feasible. We need to lower the costs by a significant amount, especially around the cost of medium and scaffolding and all of the scale up. When we talk about fermentation, I think Jason will probably say the most in the world, but we are at a very exciting stage with first products going to market, hopefully in Israel soon as well. You're building a very exciting facility in Denmark. So at this stage of the scale up, going to market, and we will soon have to face for the very first time with fermentation aspects of consumer acceptance. Let's make sure that Israel is one of the first markets in terms of regulation, at least, to adopt those products. Let's make sure that I don't know if we've said it before, but Israel is the number one global hub for alternative protein innovation. We have about 20% of the global investment in this field here in Israel. With cultivated meat, we were over 36% last year. With fermentation, of course, with your raises and others, Imagine Dairy, we're in double digits. And also in plant-based, Israel was the number one hub in investments in 2022 in plant-based startups. So all around the field, we are at the top. And also, if you take a look at the PLANETech report that came out just last week, was it?
Yeah.
You see that the number one Israeli climate tech sector is alternative proteins. So we need to maintain and be sure that we keep this position, and not only maintain our leadership in academic research and in innovation in startup, which is where we are already. Let's make sure that we create an industry here in Israel. The local food industry only currently exports 5% of what it's producing, according to the Ministry of Economy. And a lot of it is because the cost of producing and exporting from Israel is very high. We're an island country, the costs are high. Shipping from here in refrigeration is unbelievably costly. With alternative proteins, for the very first time in human history, we are building the protein products bottom up. We can create the proteins that Remilk are producing. We can create cultivated meat cells here in Israel. Let's create תעשיית עתירת ידע.
Knowledge-based industry.
Yeah, that can export these ingredients into the end markets all over the world. Like you will be doing from Denmark to the States. We can definitely do it here in Israel. If, like Shay said, the Israeli government knows how to invest resources in making sure that the startups have the best opportunity to do so in Israel, that the industry has incentives, and maybe you can mention, I don't want to be the moderator, but I am. Yeah, so Noga, maybe you can mention. No, but all of the factors of circular economy that, for example, Denmark has. Let's make sure that we have the same here in Israel. We can do it in Kiryat Shmona. We can do it in other places.
Well, I'm going to be shy because you've mentioned technologies. I agree very, very much that we have to move forward into kind of actual production. But these technologies that you just mentioned, and again, I'm looking at it as an investor in early stage technologies, we are looking for various enabling technologies or different parts of the value chain that still need innovation and development in order to kind of meet all the barriers that we just discussed. So it has to be on the end of the product, but it could also be on the production side of it. Shay, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, I just want to add my 2 cents, okay? So I think Jason was spot on, okay? It's all about CapEx required to create production, and it's all about supply chain. But I don't agree that we are competing, okay? At the end of the day, Remilk is part of our portfolio companies. And I think that if we will see it as innovation through collaboration, this is the opportunity. Okay, we have the infrastructures, but we need to find the right models to cooperate. So in different kind of fields, cultivated meat, plant-based, and even fermentations, the barriers are different. But we believe at Tnuva and Tnuva Ventures in hybrid categories, because we see the adoption of the end consumer, okay? And it's all about creating demand. And in order to create demand, you need to improve the products, the end products, significantly. So we believe in hybrid categories that will combine between plant-based, cultivated, and fermentation. This will be, I think, the major breakthrough.
Can I steal a minute? Thank you. I like Shay. I'm used to talking usually. First and foremost, I want to clarify what we view as competition, and this may sound a little bit utopian to many people, but we view the cows as the competition and not the dairy companies. And I truly, truly mean that. We work together with Tnuva, we work together with dairy companies across the globe to figure out how we can together bring their expertise in finished product formulation and manufacturing and our access to the consumers, telling a story, along with our ability to develop a new technology and produce the protein more efficiently. And only together can we bring forward that change. And I think that's really, really important to always keep in the back of our minds. In our space, in the fermentation space, it's a little bit simpler because we are, by default, ingredient producers, as opposed to some other technologies that may produce finished products already from that first process. And so we are required by default to work with others, to collaborate, and to find the right partners to bring things forward. And so, yeah, just that little note. On what Nir was saying about scaling fermentation specifically, and I can't talk too much to plant-based or cultured or cell-cultured technologies, but for scaling fermentation, precision fermentation technologies, what we understand is that we need to build very, very big to an extent that really hasn't been done before. These are not technologies that we have invented. These are technologies that have been around in industrial use for many decades. However, they've been used for different types of products that end up in different industries. They're or in the food industry, but as enzymes or therapeutic proteins, high value, low volume. We need to flip that matrix on its side, and that's when it becomes relevant for food. And so again, we need to build big, and then we need to partner with companies like Tnuva who can assist us in reaching that scale on the finished product and marketing as well.
That's I will ask another question though, and I think maybe that's an area that we maybe tend to kind of look away from, and that's the fact that the existing industry has kind of affiliate industries coming with. We're looking at textile, we're looking at animal feed, we're looking at anything that is derived maybe from this animal protein-based food industry. And my question maybe to you, Nir, is do we take a look at that and do we try and estimate how these industries are about to change and how are these treated at all in terms of inflation and calculating what impact?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that taking the broader picture into account, again, food is at the core of the issue. Most of the pollution, all of the problems that I mentioned at the beginning are derived from food. What sometimes we can see is that there are quick wins that we can tackle. For example, maybe it's a little bit difficult with going to market with a cultivated meat product because you have to go through, and it's very, it's the right thing to do, that we have to go through a very thorough regulatory process. But if you go after cultivated leather to create a leather jacket, then you don't have to do all of that. And that's sort of a quick win, but it doesn't mean that the leather industry is more important in terms of financial opportunities or climate impact, etc. So we do see some of those side stream utilization. A lot of the time, what we can see here in Israel and elsewhere is that companies are focusing on utilizing. Wow, I'm off today. Are you hearing music as well in your headphones?
That's in your head.
Cool in the gang? Yeah? Everybody cool in the gang? It's very disturbing. So, where was I? A lot of time we're seeing companies trying to utilize side stream. But that's, again, it's a quick win. And those products, I think, are very important to our ecosystem. But if we don't, again, win on taste, price, and convenience, we will not win the big market shares. Let's focus on the main dish, on the center of the plate, on what's most important, and these are the animal-derived products that we consume.
Yeah, and we need to focus in Israel on our competitive edge. It's AgTech and FoodTech. It's definitely AgTech and FoodTech.
Yeah, and I would say as well that if we look at the value chain of a whole product, right, and how you produce a finished product, there are many different things that contribute to its sustainability score, environmental impact. Part of that is packaging, part of that is transportation, part of that is processing costs, and part of that is ingredients. In the space that we operate within, in the dairy space, the ingredients are the primary contributor to the environmental impact of most finished products. So with that being said, we do view ourselves as a solution that can solve a lot of that issue even without necessarily communicating with those supplementary categories. But in the long term, if we want to make an impact on everything, then yes, we need to align with the right, again, partners who have their understanding in packaging. How do we elongate our shelf life? Our ingredient may act a little bit differently than some other ingredient that somebody has packaged before. So if we package it and process it right, can we extend shelf life and limit food waste? Can we improve sustainability on some other factors? But if you ask me, and guys with me on the panel here have said it several times, most important is taste, texture, experience, availability, and after that we can fine tune the rest, I think.
So we have about 10 minutes to the end of this panel. So I'm just gonna, since you guys just said earlier that you want to wing it, this is your opportunity to give your statement regarding this topic. What do you feel is beyond the kind of the headline saying we have to address these issues, which I completely agree with. How do we do it? Where do you feel you have to put your focus on, each of you in your different positions?
Next year business plan?
Let's do the short term, if that's what we would be doing.
Jason, please start.
My quarterly KPIs. It's a great question, and I'm going to try to wing it. I think at Remilk, really what we're understanding is the need for scale. And I mentioned this a little bit beforehand, but in order to make an impact, we need to go very, very big. Sometimes we talk about it that, if I go back a couple years in our process and we were able to produce micrograms or grams of protein, and that was a really big deal to prove a concept, to show what can be done. But when we turned to dairy companies and started to assess what are the volumes that they would need to work with in order to make the impact or even launch a product efficiently, I mean, the quantities are so much higher than what precision fermentation has been used to do for most other applications, right? Because again, these are high inclusion rate products in very, very mass consumed finished products. So we understood that we need to build big. We're actually building the world's largest precision fermentation facility at the moment in Denmark, which was mentioned here a few times. It's the world's largest by volume. But even just to put that in perspective, this will replace about 50,000 cows when it comes to the protein content. But Israel alone has, and you know this figure better than me, but I think it's about 100,000 cows at the moment, right, that are active.
A little bit more, I think.
Yeah. So even for a small country like Israel, the largest facility of its type in the world will only replace half, or have the potential to replace half, of that protein delivery. So this is a really, in my opinion, this is the first of many. Hopefully it's a model that others will see and be able to replicate as well. I don't think that we, can do this on our own by any means. So other companies should hopefully also look at this and say, we're going to establish really big facilities. But it's the only way that we make a difference. And in order to do that, this is sort of the circular aspect of, we need lots of investments. In order to raise that capital, we need to have reliability of our mission and of our results. So in order to do that, we have to run proper LCAs. In order to run a proper LCA, something I didn't mention is we have to actually know what we're comparing ourselves to, right? It's sometimes it seems obvious to compare, right? What is your benchmark? But when push comes to shove, we need big, and in order to get to big, we need some ability to tell that story reliably. Not to mention consumer acceptance, which is, consumers are awfully smart, and they're getting smarter by the day, and we all ask a lot more questions and understand a lot more about what we're reading, and we need to be able to really reliably tell that story too.
So we are facing the recession, and I think that global inflation is clear to all of us. So as the national food company and the largest alternative protein company in Israel, affordability, food safety, it's an issue that we are tackling, handling, seeking technologies for challenges all the time. Our approach is holistic. We established a few months ago the first alternative protein R&D center in Israel in order to maintain our competitive advantage in the dairy alternatives, but our strategic goals is to penetrate all other categories that we are not playing right now: chicken analogs, red meat substitutes, fish alternatives, eggs, and ingredients, of course. That's crucial for our vision. And we established Tnuva Ventures as our direct corporate venture capital fund. And right now, we are seeking mainly follow-on investments to our portfolio companies. It's crucial. It's part of our challenges, and we are analyzing deal flow all the time, but we are seeking unique technologies with real scale-up capabilities, and we are focusing on unit economics.
So if you are an entrepreneur in this room, now is the time to get into this field. We've only just begun. It's only the beginning. Don't feel like you've missed out. If you want to get into this field, you can ask others. Come talk to me and Aviv from G5. Let's find a specific opportunity. Come to talk to Noga. Let's find the way for you to be involved. If you're an investor, you should feel like you're missing out if you're not in this. I got to tell you, valuations now are the lowest they will ever be. Humanity cannot deal with it facing crisis of food security that we haven't even mentioned on this panel, of climate, of course, and others, without tackling this challenge. Now is the time to get in if you're an investor. If you are policymakers, like Hanan here, everybody knows Hanan Brand, head of the startup division in the Innovation Authority. Now is the time to double down. Israel is a global leader, but it will not be so for long unless we do strategic thinking around this area. The Ministry of Innovation just declared, I don't know if you know this, food tech and alternative proteins, and as one of the 5 most important fields in R&D in Israel. Now is the time for us to prepare for the rising global competition in this field. We saw President Biden just this week asked his ministries, like the USDA, to prepare a plan. How can the US be more involved in cultivated and fermentation, biotech industries? China is in it. President Xi of China, in their 5-year plan, also referred to this field. We've seen Denmark investing a lot of it in many other countries. Singapore. So if Israel wants to be for the long run at the top of this global, very important field, now is the time to conduct a long-term strategic plan for the government. So we have a lot of work to do, but this is a very exciting field with tons of opportunity.
Thank you, Nir, and everyone. And I think you've summed it up very well. I'll just chip in on our end, as we are at the very beginning of the value chain. Our job is to take the right technologies, even if they come from completely different fields, and see how they apply into this huge mission in Canaan. We have the benefit, I think, in a sense, that our value chain is so multidisciplinary. We can have literally technologies coming from different areas and different types, incubators like ourselves and like our other partners, backed by the Israeli Innovation Authority. This is what we do. We actually help this kind of disruption happen and move forward and actually create an ecosystem that will allow it to happen. So these are my targets for the coming years, for sure, with the support of everybody around here. And I want to thank you very much for listening to us, and we're all happy to answer your questions following this panel and chip in.
Thank you, Noga. Good job.